Did you know that Goa Trance is a key part of the early rave scene? Blending acid house elements from Europe and overnight parties in Goa province of India on the beach, Goa Trance became an ethereal journey into alternate dimensions. It used driving beats, very complex Eastern-inspired melodies, and otherworldly samples to whisk us away someplace else. In this video, I'm going to show you how we can make Goa Trance just like back in the 90s, using analog equipment, analog gear, creating sounds that will work well together, they'll have the rich textures, and will evolve over time. I'm going to take you through the essential equipment that you must have if you're going to take this approach. Not specific models, but the kind of stuff you may want to have around. The key sounds, the textures, the vibes you're trying to recreate on your synthesizers, and the arrangement, how you can pull this together in a live performance. Please hang around because I'm going to perform this live using exactly the elements I'm going to show you afterwards. How does this sound, Ganesh? I think it sounds pretty good. See you on the other side. Okay, cats, we're going to look at 3 essential elements needed to recreate Goa Trance. First, let's look at equipment. Back in the 1990s, the way Goa Trance was made was exactly like this. You would have some synthesizer, a sampler and or a drum machine, and very importantly, some effects. And that's what you would use to record at via a mixer on some form of tape. Eventually, computers came into the pictures, but this is the OG way of doing Goa Trance. So what equipment do we have here today? For the beats, a drum machine, drum brute impact. This is all analog drum machine. For one key sample, gotta have something otherworldly in Goa Trance. We have circuit tracks just to play that one sample. Most important is how we mesh together the rhythms from the drum machine and the synthesizers. This is how these things are connected. The circuit tracks here is a master clock. It sends MIDI out both to the drum machine and to all these individual synthesizers. We have a Moog here that will play a bass part, a Oberheim TO5 that'll play some lead melodies, and Minlog XD is going to play some background melodies, as will the West Pest. The audio from all these things is ultimately ending up in a mixer, although the bass is going first through Nemesis delay, then through Blue Sky reverb. The snare and the hi-hats from here are going through analog heat to saturate them a little bit before going into the mixer. Also, the West Pest is being processed through Fable delay as well as a phaser, and I'll talk more about that in a second when we discuss the sounds. Okay? The sounds of Goa Trance. Number 2. What are the sounds that we're trying to make? Well, let's talk about kick and bass first, because that's often the most defining of any electronic music genre. Here's a kick that I'm using today. Okay, so this is a kick from this drum machine. I did not make this kick. Not the perfect Goa kick, but it has few key elements. It's fairly saturated. It has some girth to it. Compared to something like this, it's much more hollow and empty. You need to have the thud and a little bit of a boom. There's also a good amount of high frequency content that you want with the Goa kick, although I had to add some on the mixer, just given the way this kick is here. Okay? Bass. Let's hear the bass. So how did we get to this bass? Often in Goa Trance you would have droney bass lines that have more of a sustained tone rather than Psytrance-like 16-note sequences. I went for something in between, which I think is pretty typical for a lot of Goa Trance tracks from the early 90s. Okay, let's remove the effect. Let's get rid of the kick for now. So you'll see here that this is a basic square wave. I think square wave has that computer sound and really is cool to use for basses. Despite many oscillators on the synthesizers, I'm basically only using one. And that's because when you really listen to Goa Trance, well, there are a lot of sounds and they can be complexly interwoven together. Often, the sounds themselves are fairly simple in terms of texture. Part of that is really trying to have a nice transient as well. So here basically we have a square wave filter at about 80 Hertz, but a half the amount of envelope generation, so that we have that filter opening and closing pretty quickly. Right now you can also hear some reverb just to give it some space. But the key part are effects. Modulation is an essential element of creating the Goa Trance sound. So if we have the bass like this, it sounds first a bit clicky and really doesn't have that space and doesn't have that protracted quality that we want from a Goa Trance bassline. So for that we're going to add some delay. So not just are we getting additional notes, we're also transforming this into a pad-like sound in a certain sense, blurring it together a little bit. I'm also using a delay that involves a filter sweep to add some movement over time, and then the reverb helps to give it a little bit more texture. Now notice how this bass is now blending with the kick drum a little bit better. Hi-hat. So often a Roland 909 would be used back in the day, but this basic interplay of the kick and a fairly loud hi-hat is very common to Goa Trance. Okay, lead synthesizer. So again, here we have a sawtooth wave sound, again going through low pass filter with some envelope, but not as much. So this is no envelope, this is full envelope. The reason we're using little envelope here, so you can just basically use sound more when it's muted here, as well when it's open for energy. Notice how the rhythms of the bass and this lead sound are working together half the time and syncopated the other half the time in order to create some longevity and interest. Okay. So here we just have some delay and reverb. Trying to keep this somewhat simple because it's playing a key role. Okay. Then we have another arpeggio. So this is West Best, again, single oscillator. Here we are using two oscillator, I forgot to mention that. So single oscillator here. To make it more interesting, I'm using an analog phaser here. Okay. So you'll notice that the nature of the sound is shifting, and that rate is basically set here. So if we can... So this is more crazy jumping around, but we really wanted this flow. And by folding this wave a little bit, we can again add extra harmonics, and we basically get more clarity in this phasing movement over time. Let's hear this with bass and the other synthesizer. Okay, we already have something that's pretty recognizable like Goa Trance, both because we have this 16th note rhythms that are happening, we have this Indian type percussive patterns, and this sound, this saw sound, is very indicative of early trance Goa included. But notice that that phaser is important. Okay, let's put these sounds together and see what we have. We need to have some percussion. Okay, I'm using this FM drum here. You could use a sample of any kind of ethnic drum. It's actually a synthesized drum, but it sounds pretty cool, and it does the job here. Okay, final synthesizer. for a little spaciness. Notice stereo separation in the delay, key part to fill out the space. And notice that each sound is different because they have to work well together. So even if they're all happening, this really has strong, transient, real plucky, abrasive sound. This has quite a slow attack, so not a pluck. This way we can hear both things. This also blends with these two. Becomes a little more plucky when the filter is open. Okay, so we looked at the equipment, we looked at the kind of sounds that you want to make. Let's look at arrangement. So Goa Trance is based generally on a 16-bar structure, and there are varieties of that you can hear here. So if we just listen, so they're basically 2-bar phrase here. This is basically a 1-bar or even a half-bar phrase. But this modulation, especially with this pluck synthesizer here, creates interest over time, as well as the delays that are happening in the background. Now, during arranging this for live performance, you want to have those drops that are an essential part of early trance. So if we're going strong here, for example, I programmed another little part that can serve as a drop using the same sounds, but using it more as a pad. The same Oberheim sound, but using it more as a pad. And now we can create some anticipation. This can be shorter or longer.
Spirits from the other world.
We can use a little bit of this granular delay. Now I'm mixing this together with the raw signal here. We can even close this filter. Just end up in a wash. So this is how we would do a build-up. And we're off to the races.
Spirits from the other world. Spirits from the other world. Spirits from the other world. Spirits from the other world.
Well, that brings us back around, doesn't it? We've finished our journey of exploring Goa Trance, looking at how analog synthesizers were used to make this amazing music back in the day. I hope this inspired you to listen more of trance and to make your own Goa Trance. Please don't be shy. Subscribe to this channel. Let me know what else you'd like to hear. Nighty night.